The True North Fantasy Pod is back. I got a new partner in crime, and we're going to be talking draft winners and losers. Who came out squeaky clean and whose soul was crushed. We're also going to get into some rookies that we're planting our flags on in 2025. Thanks for joining. We are fired up for the relaunch. Let's get it. What is up, fantasy people? The True North Fantasy Football Pod is back to inform, empower, and entertain you towards making sound fantasy decisions. I am Trav, hosting and West Coasting this relaunch of the True North Fantasy Pod. It has felt so good to say all of this stuff that I've been saying as I open the show. And to introduce you to that new partner in crime, he is fellow Canadian on the other side of Canada, though. Still putting in great work in the fantasy landscape. The Italian stallion, one Mr. Frank Amaranti. How you doing, brother? How's it coming out of enriching the minds of the youngsters of Canada?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to start this show with you, and I'm excited to talk football. I already started dabbling in some best ball. I'm back in the zone after, I'm still, in the thick of it in baseball, but it's nice to start some best ball drafts. Here in Ontario, we only got drafters, like we don't have underdog, but I did a couple of those and it was fun. And it's just draft season's the most enjoyable for me, whether it's creating content or even just as a player and just picking through the weeds and seeing who you like and who are winners and losers after the real NFL draft. It's going to be fun to talk about it today.
Totally. Yeah, it's funny looking at your Twitter feed, Frank. You are heavy into the baseball, but right now you can kind of see that kind of meld where you're putting out content for both and starting to move into getting the fantasy football content out. So love to see it, Frank. Love all the work that you do on both the baseball and the football side of things. For all that social media information, you can find it all in that episode description there, mine, Frank's, and True North Fantasy Football's. And of course, make sure you subscribe on that YouTube channel, hit the like button, leave us a comment to show some love and let us know what you think. It's going to be fun. This is just number one, so we are just getting started. We got a lot of fun stuff. And for those previous True North listeners, welcome back. Thank you for sticking it out. Appreciate you staying subscribed to that channel. Excited to be able to do this. And I think I've got the right man to team up with me ever since. It's been a while since Ty kind of left the space. I've been kind of looking for a way to get the True North name back out there, Frank, and I am ever appreciative of you for being someone who is willing to kind of team up with me, and let's see where we can take this bad boy. We
Let's
also
do
got
it.
the Substack. Go check out tnff.start.page. You can find any of our written work there. Going to be lots more coming as the season approaches. So tonight, Frank, it's going to be a good episode. We're going to be kind of transitioning off of the NFL draft. We are in a lot of rookie drafts and things right now. So we're going to be transitioning off that. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest veteran winners and losers from the NFL draft as we look into 2025. Some of these guys might be primed for big seasons or maybe another big season. And then at the end, Frank, we are going to plant our flags, like I mentioned. We are going to stamp the rookies that we are buying into for the 2025 season. Of course, we'll be analyzing kind of from like a season long standpoint, not so much dynasty. There might be some of those takes sprinkled in because we can't help ourselves. But a lot of this is going to be centered around the next following season. And so today we're going to talk about these rookies who we think will produce for 2025. You ready, Frank?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's do it. So I'm going to start us off actually in the winners and losers segment of this show. Figured it was only fitting to throw in some Canadian content just to start here, Frank, with some Canadian running backs. My two biggest winners is from the running back. Well, two of my biggest winners. There are two other ones as well. Chase Brown and Chuba Hubbard. Canadian running backs, we love them. We always root for them. Very few and far between. So when we get them, we hold on to them tight. And Chase Brown and Chuba Hubbard are guys that I think we can continue to hold on to, Frank. The Bengals were widely regarded as a team that was going to be picking up a running back in the NFL draft. They picked up Taj Brooks, who was a later pick, but I don't think he is necessarily an indictment on Chase Brown's future. Chase Brown's going to be a top 10 running back for me going into the 2025 season, I think, attached to this Bengals offense. So I am all in on Chase Brown for the Bengals. Chuba Hubbard, maybe not such a rosy situation in Carolina, obviously, but I think that's a team that's on the upswing. I will talk a little bit about them later. And I think Chuba Hubbard, we saw it all last year. They re-signed him to that 4-year contract after they were really uncertain about Jonathan Brooks' injury. And then they proceeded to use him as a pure bell cow in that offense. Now, Like if Jonathan Brooks comes back, they did sign Rico Dowdle. They did draft Travis Etienne. So there are a couple of guys there, but it looks to me like they want to use a bell cow. And I think Chuba is the most ready to do that in this offense. So I felt like I'd go with some Canadian content there. Throw out a little Chase Brown, throw out a little Chuba Hubbard, and let's see where we go. Because I am investing in both of those guys now, seeing what happened at the draft.
Yeah, really like those calls. Chase Brown, you look at underdog ADPs going in like the fourth round. That's just way too low. That'll be closer, probably at least third round when we get closer to the start of the season. Like you said, the Bengals really showed a trust in Chase Brown down the stretch. He had heavy usage, and a 6th-round pick is not a hefty investment in his replacement. Zach Moss will be back. They brought in Samaje Perine, but you have to love it, the role for Brown. I still think he'll be a workhorse, and he's got explosive abilities using the passing game. Bengals defense still is not good. You're going to see lots of shootouts. So I
Mm-hmm.
love Chase Brown. On to what you said about Chuba Hubbard. Always feels like he's underrated because people are just expecting someone to take his job, but he was just a godsend for like zero RB type of drafters last year. People were expecting Jonathan Brooks to eventually take over. Never happened. And now the Panthers brought in Rico Dowdle. That might suppress Hubbard's ADP a little bit. Right now he goes at the end of the 5th round, which is pretty rock solid value. And I don't think I'm worried too much about Rico Dowdle. Like he was decent for the Cowboys, but that just feels like a change of pace. And this is Chuba's backfield, given, like you said, with the contract extension. So I love those two calls.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. And I think for Chuba, like to me, Trevor Etienne is more of a threat to Chuba's pass catching work than Rico Dowdle is to take over that bell cow role. So yeah, I'm not necessarily too worried about Rico Dowdle. He's kind of a jag for me. So Frank, since all we do is win, 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 no matter what, who is your biggest winner coming out of the NFL draft?
So I had to go with Bryce Young, quarterback. You look at what Bryce Young did after the Panthers bye last year, and he really came on as a passer. And in fantasy, was great. He had a 23.6 game, a 27.1 point game, and then in week 18, 36.4, like showing a high ceiling. You look at the game log, and he ran for 5 touchdowns during that stretch. Now, is that sustainable? Probably not. Like Bryce Young's 5'10", 204, but it just goes to show that he's not a zero in the running game. He's going to
Yeah,
provide running production. He even season high in rushing yards was 68. So you add that to the improved passing that Bryce Young showed. Dave Canales is a good coach. We saw how he helped Baker Mayfield, started to show signs that he's helping Bryce Young. And now after the draft, Panthers invest heavily in receiver, bringing in Ted McMillan, new alpha wide receiver one, drawing comparisons, as you know, to Drake London, Mike Evans. That big body threat could really help Bryce Young, help the offense overall. Like you said, the Panthers' arrows pointing up. And, you look at Bryce Young's price in best ball
yeah,
league, like he's a type of quarterback you could take late as your QB2 or 3, and he can wind up finishing in the top 15, maybe top 12, maybe top 10 with that rushing ability I mentioned. Like he goes behind Cam Ward right now. So behind Michael Penix. And who would you rather have? Like Young runs a little more than Penix. I think I'd rather have Bryce Young there, even though
I
Penix
think
has a
so.
much better group of pass catchers. Bryce Young looks like a nice QB sleeper. I think he's a big winner after they took McMillan.
Totally. And he has just that little bit less level of uncertainty than does Michael Penix. Like Michael Penix's range of outcomes is 0 all the way up to 100 right now, where I think Bryce Young probably starts at like a 15 to a 20 up to 100, being what we saw last year when that offense was able to put together. Because there's no denying that Bryce Young was brought into an absolute dog shit situation, Frank. It was terrible. And now that they've got Dave Canales in there, who is an offensive mind I trust, I'm really excited to see what he can do with another year and some more weapons in the fold in a guy like Ted McMillan and maybe Chuba more supplanted as that bell cow running back going into the year. So yeah, not necessarily maybe an offense that we're clamoring to attach to in the Carolina Panthers, but one that's on the upswing and that will take some pieces if the cost is right for sure.
Definitely.
Okay, Frank. So my biggest loser is kind of attached to somebody who I thought was a winner. My biggest loser was Jalen McMillan. And a part of this is due to maybe the heartstrings, Frank, because I am very heavily invested in one Jalen McMillan. And he is somebody who I was kind of planting a flag as a breakout for 2025 potentially, right? He had those 8 touchdowns last year with Chris Godwin's injury. We see Chris Godwin coming into the season rehabbing an injury again this year. Mike Evans is getting older. We thought one of those breakouts could come for Jalen McMillan, taking over some more of that slot work with Chris Godwin going outside. But now, with the first round selection of one Emeka Egbuka, it's kind of a anyone's guess as to what Jalen McMillan's outlook could be, because no longer does he have the slot role locked down in situations where he's going to spell Godwin or when Godwin eventually leaves, maybe. Jalen McMillan probably doesn't have that locked down at this point. Emeka Egbuka is at least going to man the slot in 3 wide receiver sets. And then in 2 wide receiver sets, if it's not going to be Godwin at the flanker, it's definitely not going to be Jalen McMillan, because it's going to be Emeka Egbuka. So I think the shelf life on these wide receivers, it's nice that it's a little bit longer. But for me, Jalen McMillan isn't a proposition for another few years. And so for me, I just have to be out for 2025, unfortunately, unless he catches a couple injuries, which are definitely possible with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But I don't think in my season long drafts this year, I'm going to be drafting very much Jalen McMillan. In best ball, I'll definitely be stacking that Bucks offense, because the passing offense is one that we want to attach to. But man, I think that outlook for Jalen McMillan, which was rosy coming up into the draft, and I didn't think they were going to take that first round wide receiver, Frank. Did you think they were going to go that route? And what do you think Emeka Egbuka's impact is on this offense, and then in turn, just Jalen McMillan?
Yeah, I didn't think the Bucks were going to take a receiver just because they have Evans, Godwin, and McMillan. I thought they'd go to on the defensive side of the ball, but maybe this speaks to their concern about Godwin's return from
Mm-hmm.
injury. Maybe it'll take Godwin some time. I think Igbuka could, man the slot, or like you said, even be versatile, play on outside too. I like Igbuka a lot, but it may take some time for him to get integrated and get really involved in the offense. So the opposite side of the argument is maybe, Jalen McMillan, he had a great second half of his rookie season, started to come on. Maybe he could keep that rolling, and it's Igbuka who gets it off to a slower start to his rookie year. That's a possibility too. I agree with you in the sense that McMillan is definitely a loser, but we could look at it if McMillan keeps falling in ADP, where
Yeah.
on draftsharks.com, it shows the market index, like how they've risen or fallen. Jalen McMillan right now at the end of the 9th round, and underdog, has fallen 59 spots. I think McMillan will fall even more.
Mm-hmm.
It could get to the point where it might be worth just taking a shot that maybe maintains a role, or maybe Igbuka takes longer to be integrated. But with that said, I do totally agree that McMillan's a loser from this draft, in the Bucks investing another first rounder in a receiver.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to choose to attach to your level of optimism there, Frank, and maybe have more of a glimmer of hope myself now that you said that, because yeah, that avenue is definitely there, and not all first round rookies come in and succeed right away. And McMillan's got a little bit more time in the office, so okay, all right, we got a little bit more optimism on the Jalen McMillan front. I like it, Frank. I like it, Frank. So, who was your one big pathetic loser coming out of the NFL draft?
So this one's interesting because I'm going to go on to say that this player is a loser, but is someone that you could still take because it will reduce ADP, and that's Najee Harris of the Chargers. How can we
Mm.
not list Harris as a loser after the Chargers used a first rounder on a running back? But I tweeted this the other day, and I drew parallels with this situation to the Lions in 2023. Like, they signed David
Mm.
Montgomery, 3-year deal, veteran with somewhat of a track record, and they still used the first rounder on a running back in Jameer Gibbs, and the much more talented, heavily touted running back, just like Omarion Hampton is. And we saw that season. It took a while for Gibbs to get rolling. Montgomery
Mhm.
started off the year strong and then still maintained value throughout the season. Now, of course, the Chargers supporting cast, their offensive line is not as good as the Lions, but it's still a good offensive line. They still have Justin Herbert. They still had a strong running game last year. And maybe you could say Najee's not as good as David Montgomery, which is true. He's not. But Najee Harris, like Montgomery, still has somewhat of a track record. And, he's been a bell cow in the NFL. Teams tend to maybe trust him that he could handle a workload. My point being is that, with even though Harris is a loser, it will be reflected in his price after the Chargers took Hampton, and it might make Harris a value. Like, You look at underdog ADP now, he goes mid sixth round. Najee Harris fallen 50 spots. He could continue to fall in price to the point where why not take a shot? He could still have a red zone role, may take
Yeah.
Hampton some time to be fully integrated. I think we got to use the case with David Montgomery to, maybe this is worth a look in taking Harris if his price falls to an appealing point.
Totally. And I think to your point, the fact that Najee Harris's contract is only 1 year versus that 3 year that they gave to David Montgomery, the perception of Naj might even be worse than what you're saying. And he could continue to slide and continue to slide because of this.
Yes.
Now, I'm with you though. I think he has standalone value even alongside Omari and Hampton. We know that Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball a ton. If he could run the ball 43 times a game, he would run the ball 43 times a game. And I think you need a couple backs to be able to do that. Now, I think Omari and Hampton does have some size. So this isn't a situation where these guys' roles are super defined, with one being kind of a third down pass catcher and one being a bruiser goal line. So there is maybe some cannibalism there, but I do think that like you said, the goal line role, maybe just give it to the old busted, well, not busted, but the older running back who's taken the workload, and let him pile those carries in at the end zone and save your younger running back. And, later in the season and into next season and stuff, you start giving him those tougher churning yards that you were giving Najee. So I think that, yeah, Najee, people are underselling him even with the addition of Omari and Hampton, because we saw multiple backs used and be successful in that Chargers running game last year. From week to week, of course, like we weren't super stoked that we had Gus Edwards, but a couple weeks he gave us decent games. J.K. Dobbins gave us a ton, so that running game is going to be fruitful. And so I want pieces, and Najee's much cheaper than Omari and Hampton.
Exactly.
Okay, Frank, we're moseying here. This is good. This is good. We are getting into these rookie flag plans. I just want to remind anybody who's listening to go subscribe to that YouTube channel. That's going to be kind of the meat and potatoes of our content is through the podcast. So check it out there, as well as that Substack at tnff.start.page. That's all in the episode descriptions. So go check it out and show some support for me and Frank and all the work we're putting in. But yeah, let's wave a little bit of flaggage here, Frank. And these aren't red flags. We're waving green flags. And I think that's like, some vernacular for the kids these days when somebody has like a positive trait or something. And so why not translate that into fantasy football and talk about these guys that we're planting our flags on? So we're going to go by position. We're going to give one by position. And I would actually invite you to kick it off with your quarterback, Frank.
All right. So this one is more of a best ball and dynasty take than like started both players redraft type. But it's Tyler Shuck of the New Orleans Saints. It's just a contrarian take with everyone, including me, ripping on the pick because he's 26 years old. Like I don't like the pick either. But what if consensus is wrong and he's actually a decent, competent starter? Established the run. Evan Silva, I was listening. He said Nick Underhill, I believe his name, Saints beat writer, thinks that Chuck has a legit chance to be the week one starter for the Saints. And if you're in best ball, you take a QB3, he's virtually free in
Yeah.
draft. That could be a buying opportunity. Maybe you pair him with Chris Olave. Like, remember, Kellen Moore is the coach now, and we saw how he helped. He'd use Keenan Allen in the slot or CeeDee Lamb, and that was really fruitful. What if he does that and moves Olave around? And if Olave could stay healthy, that could be, quite a profit at cost. And then you attach Shuck with them.
Yeah.
You look at the supporting cast. They've invested in the offensive line with a first round pick, a couple of them, actually two in a row with Fuaga as well. And who
Mm-hmm.
did they take this? It was Banks, right?
Kelvin Banks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Banks.
Kelvin Banks. Yeah.
So another tackle there. You look at his receivers, Olave, Shaheed. They even brought in Brandon Cooks,
Yeah.
depth piece. It might not be. It's not to say that this is going to be someone you could start in redraft, but in best ball, making a Saints stack with a contrarian play like this, virtually free in drafts, I like it. And then in Dynasty, I know we're not going to talk too much of Dynasty, but
No, it's all good, brother.
like a quick note, like you could get starting quarterback in round 3 rookie drafts. A, it's helpful in super flex just to have that starter on your bench. B, what if he's actually decent? Then all of a sudden you have a really nice value. So I'm in, even though in theory I didn't like the pick as a whole from a
Totally.
real life perspective. But you got to look at the ways that this could turn into nice profit in fantasy, and it could be a value here.
Yeah, it's all in the path to start, right? Like right now, It's undecided whether Derek Carr is going to be back there. They're sitting there with Spencer Rattler just on an island, looking like their only quarterback going into the season. And so they needed to add. And I guess the age and the experience of Tyler Shuck was enough for them to bite. I think for me, it's kind of like what you said. The flip is what you're looking for with him, right? You're looking for the flip. So in a season long managed league, you pick him up off waivers. Maybe he has a couple of good starts. If it's a super flex league, somebody needs a quarterback too. You flip him for way more than what you got him for, right? And then
Yeah,
in the dynasty league, like you mentioned, in a dynasty setting, basically you're waiting for him to have a few good starts and look like the cemented starter, and then you're flipping him for at least a first plus because he looks like a cemented starter. And in Superflex, for me, in a dynasty setting, a starting quarterback doesn't go for less than a first round pick. So I like that. And we've been kind of talking about that. I have a dynasty show as well, Dynasty Underground with the Undroppables, and we've been talking about a lot of that with him. He's not somebody necessarily that we're stoked about having on the roster. It's more a guy that we want to see that spike in value, and we want to try and flip that
yeah.
spike in value.
Yeah, just think like if he gets in now, like if he looks great in preseason, Chuck, and then it's Chuck, right? I'm saying it right. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it is. I don't know.
yeah.
Whatever you
So
want, man.
yeah, so like imagine he looks good in preseason, and then he's announced as the starter. You could flip him before week 1, or you
Yeah,
wait and, like you said, have a good game. It's just a potentially appreciating asset. And if you're in early drafts, like you're really into it, like us, whether it's underdog drafters, any best ball league, like right now he's free if he's announced as a starter. Not to say he's going to fly up, but he'll move up a round or two in
totally.
ADP. So you're getting some value in that sense too. So that's what I like here.
Totally. And if you think about the stacking opportunities, Saints stacks might be the cheapest stacks you can get in all of fantasy football.
Yeah.
You'd be taking a risk going for Tyler Shuck, like taking a stand that he's going to be the starting quarterback. But I mean, the payoff with like a, 25th round pick is probably pretty good there.
Yeah.
um, okay, my quarterback, Frank, also like not a guy who I think is going to be a quarterback one at all this season and probably more of a futures pick, but I'm planting a flag on Shadur Sanders. Um, Very controversial pick in the draft. I know it was. Definitely should not have gone in the 5th round, though. I think he probably should have gone in like the maybe 2nd round or something like that. But alas, he didn't. And he went to the Browns. So I'm not saying that he's going to be a quarterback one for 2025, obviously. But I do think, Frank, that we are going to see some starts out of Shadur Sander as early as this year. Um, and I think he can be a good quarterback in that or Kevin Stefanski offense because Kevin Stefanski wants to keep it low passing volume. He wants to keep it running through the run game and have quick timing passing for his quarterback. And I think that's great for Shadur Sanders. So I don't know. Looking at the path, Dylan Gabriel was obviously drafted in front of him. I think he's kind of more a guy that's just going to be groomed behind the starters. He's got Kenny Pickett, who has done nothing but show us that he is not a starting caliber NFL quarterback. And then he's got 40-year-old Joe Flacco, which honestly I think is his biggest roadblock because Joe Flacco's looked nothing but adequate the last couple of years when he's gotten in there and had a chance to start. So we remember the season that Flacco had when he signed on with the Browns late in the season and had the comeback player of the year. I'm not saying we're going to get that out of Joe Flacco because he was playing out of this universe, but I think he can be serviceable enough. But he is a 40-year-old quarterback. He does have a long history, and there's somebody's going to be waiting in the wings to throw some passes there. And I think Shadur is eventually going to be the next man up. If they get in a bind, Frank, the noise that's going to be coming from the fans, the noise that's probably going to be coming from the owner, who seems to have forced Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to make that pick. They were absolutely miserable in the green room or in whatever their war room when they made that pick. So I don't know. I think the flag that I'm planting on is that Shadur's going to get some meaningful starts this year and that we're going to go into next season with him at least competing for the starting job in Cleveland.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Shadur Sanders, confident player, chip on his shoulder now after falling in the draft. We can't undersell that. That's a huge impact. Um, I think he'll start at some point, and there's an outside chance it could be week 1. So same thing with Shuck here is, as a QB3 in best ball, or if you're in a super flex redraft league, worth a look to take a shot because, the Browns, like you said, Stefanski can put together a pretty solid offense. They got Judy, they got Njoku, they drafted a tight end and Harold Fannin,
Mm-hmm.
and they brought in Deontay Johnson, who I think could be a sneaky contributor. I don't think
Yeah,
he's
totally.
done. So
It's unless he's a nutcase. It's just the
yeah,
nutcase factor with him, right? It's not talent, it's nutcase
yeah.
factor. I actually think Cedric Tillman's a pretty good
Yeah, and
return
then
too.
Tillman too. Sorry, I missed him. Yeah, so it's a decent group there. I like that call.
Yeah, yeah. Just let him be a distributor, right? He doesn't have to hold the team on his shoulders because he's not that kind of quarterback by any means. What position should we do next, Frank? Should we get the tight ends out of the way? Should we go sexy with the running backs? What do you think? And you take it away, sir.
All right, let's go with running back. So this is someone I really like, but it could be to a point where there's so much steam that he becomes too expensive, and that's RJ Harvey. I love how Sean Payton handpicked him as the running back. Payton was adamant that the Broncos needed to add one, and it's a fruitful role if the player gets more like becomes the lead back because Bo Nix will check it down. Sean Payton's offense, they throw to the running back a lot. So there's upside with RJ Harvey, but that's the thing. Everyone sees that. So it might become really to a point where he gets too expensive, RJ Harvey. So we'll have to monitor that. Right now he's still, draftable. Kind of sucks because you'd know that if you got him pre-draft, if you're doing early best ball, you would have got an even better price. But I do like the landing spot for Harvey, and I'm hopeful that he has has a productive rookie season. But we got to monitor the ADP as the offseason goes along.
Yeah, totally. And to your point, that steam is already
Yeah.
here, Frank. He's going off the board on underdog as the running back 22 in
Yeah.
the
See,
mid sixth round already.
so
Mid
what's the
sixth
best site?
round.
Because I don't have underdog in Ontario anymore.
Oh,
What's the
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
what's
yeah.
the best site to find ADP? Because there's one I was looking at, it's not updated. So
I just look at the underdog, like they have where you can
right on
import
the
your
site.
rankings or
Yeah.
where you can kind of like make your queue to select your rankings. And beside that is the ADP. So this is probably like an amalgamation of all of their tournaments and stuff. So it's maybe like, somewhere around that. But
Yeah.
that's what
So
I've been seeing in these rookie drafts where he's going off the board at 106, Frank. Like it is
yeah, so he's
steamy for
really
RJ
starting to
Harvey.
get too much
Yeah.
steam. Even though I like him, I like the landing spot. It's getting expensive. So
That just gives him no room to return, right? Because
yeah,
you've paid for him at his ceiling, and so there's no room for him to outperform his price at that point. I am all in on him though. Like I love him. I think the situation's fantastic. Maybe I do have an inkling of worry about him being in more of a committee than what we're giving it credit for, being that Sean Payton's history
yeah.
has a bunch of committees, but he did have a lot of guys that produced in those committees. I'm just not 100% sure yet that RJ Harvey is Reggie Bush or is Alvin Kamara, but I think we're going to find out. And Sean Payton handpicked him for it. So I don't mind investing in him if you are a stalwart for RJ Harvey at the price he's at now, because we do think he is going to be a very strong running back. But I think you just got to be aware that you're drafting him at ceiling. And so there's more downside on that than there is upside, I'd say.
And we also have to point out that how many times last year did Sean Payton, talk up Audric Estime, and then, we're hyping him up for the week. He's a waiver pickup. We're ranking him above consensus and weekly rankings, and then
Three
Estime goes
PPR
off.
points.
Yeah, and he doesn't even barely sees the field. So Sean Payton's not very trustworthy. So that's worth noting too. So even though I like the player and landing spot because there's so much steam, he might not even be someone that I draft a lot. So it's a little contradictory in saying he's a flag plant player, but
Mm,
I mention him because I like the player and the landing spot, but like when we're playing fantasy, we always have to consider price. Are they priced at their ceiling or not? So this one maybe is more. I like him. Maybe I like him a little more in Dynasty, Harvey,
oh, yeah.
uh, where you can. I know you said he goes as high as the sixth
That's
overall
not
pick.
regular, though.
Sometimes
It's
he
usually
could go
8
a
to
little
10,
later,
8 to 10, 8 to
so
12.
I'm okay with it a little more there. But if he starts going Harvey in like the fifth round, it might be a little bit tough.
For sure, for sure. But your point is firmly taken. Like we love the player, we love the landing spot, and we love the potential opportunity that is coming. And you never know, maybe he proves us wrong, Frank.
Yeah.
So my guy actually is going one running back spot after RJ Harvey in underdogs rankings. He's going four picks after, but as the running back, the running back 24, there's one guy in between them. My guy's Quinshon Judkins, Frank. So what if I told you, Frank, that you could have a running back with the rushing workload of a Nick Chubb, but also getting targets and catching passes? Because that's what you're getting in one Quinshon Judkins, I think. First off, this team, the Browns, they are going to want to run the ball. We talked about their quarterback situation. It ain't rosy. And so the best way to insulate that position is by bringing in a solid running game. And Quinshon Judkins in the second round can absolutely do that. Last year, Obviously, this team was a train wreck with Nick Chubb being injured for most of the season. The offense was just terrible. They could not score, and so they had to pass the ball a lot, obviously. But for me, I think Quinshon Judkins was brought in to do just that. At the post-draft presser, Stefanski and Andrew Berry were talking up his pass-catching prowess. They were also kind of linking that to how Nick Chubb had a lot better pass-catching prowess than the target amount that he got. So they're going to really try and make a concerted effort to utilize that skill set with Quinshon, where they might not have utilized it with Nick Chubb. I thought that was pretty interesting. So I think the things that the team is telling us is obviously that Quinshon Judkins is going to allow them to keep doing what they're doing. And for me, Frank, I just recently started to put together my 2025 rankings now that the running backs are in there, or all the landing spots, of course, are there. It might be a little steamy, but I think right now I have Quinshon Judkins as my running back 17 for the 2025 season, just with the potential workload and volume that's going to be there. Jerome Ford is still there. Dylan Sampson was drafted there. I think those guys are change of pace. Dylan Sampson is not built to take this kind of workload. And then Jerome Ford has actually been really good when given the opportunity, but it just seems like year over year over year, they have been trying to find somebody to replace him or trying to make sure that Nick Chubb's healthy to go so they don't have to rely on Jerome Ford that much. So it's kind of where I stand. It might be out on a limb with that running back 17 ranking, but the sentiment stands that Quinshon Judkins is going to smash now and forever.
Yeah, so that ranking of yours speaks to how that range of running backs can be like it's like a glob of them where no one stands
Yes.
out, where you can really rank one of the running backs you like a lot more higher. And it sounds high, but if I read out the names, it might not be so crazy. Like, there's Chuba Hubbard, Trevion Henderson, Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Walker, James Conner, David Montgomery. There's some committee backs there, risk of a second year back in Connor's case, taking on more role.
Yeah.
Maybe Montgomery with Ben Johnson gone. Maybe it's more of the Jameer Gibbs show. Like there's
Yeah.
ways you can convince yourself that Judkins, like there's ways to frame an argument where Judkins can be ranked as high as you have him. And to your point, the runway is clear for heavy usage for Judkins. We know that Stefanski could put together a strong running game. Yeah, I'm not against it at all. It's a great landing spot for him, and he's a good pick. But well, again, with these rookies, people get rookie fever. They could really
Mm-hmm.
speed up the draft boards, where to the point where it's a little bit tough. So, with that said, we're gonna have to see where where the ADP finishes out, or like as the ADP changes throughout the offseason on Judkins.
Yeah, totally. And I definitely have the Judkins fever. So I am totally willing. I'm going to reassess this and make sure that I'm being rational when I actually finalize these rankings. But for now, I just love the steam on Quinshon. Okay, wide receivers, Frank, get into it.
All right, wide receiver. One rookie I like taking is Luther Burden, because Burden was a prospect a lot of people liked, and you look at it, the new regime is who drafted Burden. So Ben Johnson, the elite offensive mind, clearly is high on this receiver because think about it, they're pretty strong at receiver. DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, and Ben Johnson still was willing to take one. What does that say? It says that he really likes the prospect in Luther Burden. And, Burden will go later in drafts because it's a crowded receiver room. But he's a perfect player in redraft to stash on your bench. And maybe later in the season, he has more of an impact. Or maybe you want to go the route of, if you're investing in a Bears receiver, you go with the cheapest one. That's drafted
Mm-hmm.
by this regime. Burden could play in the slot. He can make an impact. And I think he's a nice pick.
Yeah, totally. And I think he can play in kind of both areas. And the natural kind of comparison looking at Ben Johnson is to link Luther Burden to the Amon-Ra St. Brown role. And if that's the case, then it's wheels up, right? Like Amon-Ra is getting targeted at a crazy rate. He's actually not as slot heavy as you would think. He's about 55% in the slot and about 45% outside, which I think is something that we like, to be clear. Like we don't want him being in the slot any more than that, because getting those snaps on the outside, and he was incredible from the outside. I think he was top 10 in yards per route run from the outside. So that just gives him that ultimate upside, which is what we've seen the last couple of years out of Amon-Ra, where you don't necessarily see that out of these guys that are pigeonholed into the slot and have to play there 80% of the time. So if that's the case, it's wheels up on Luther Burden. And I've been drafting him a ton in my dynasty leagues, Frank. So yeah, as early as this year, as early as mid-season this year, we could see him getting significantly involved. And my take is that DJ Moore is going to be gone after this season. So that offense is going to run through Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, and Roma Dunze, as well as whoever the running backs are in place. So, and
Could
I think
happen.
that Ben Johnson can uphold 3 quality options too, I think, which is important to note that for the long term, there's going to be multiple guys producing in this Bears offense. A lot of it hinging on Caleb Williams and how good he is. But he would have to be absolutely atrocious to tank this situation. So time will tell on that. So yeah, I love the Burden flag plant. He's another guy for me where, like, especially if you're looking in rookie drafts, he's right almost at the back of the tier with guys like Jaden Higgins and maybe even a guy like Trey Harris, where after that, the wide receiver pickings get really, really, really slim. So if you have that opportunity, I would say you pounce on it if you need a wide receiver.
Love it.
My guy is very chalky, Frank. It's like the chalkiest of chalk, and it is one Tet McMillan. We apparently were a huge Carolina Panthers show today because every segment we've had a Carolina Panthers player that we've been
Yeah,
talking
damn.
about here. But just goes to show that they're on the upswing, right? And Tet McMillan is no exception to that. Some of this for me is to kind of stand firm on that pre-draft evaluation, right, Frank? Like Tet McMillan to me, and being in Canada, I'm not as plugged in, obviously, to the college football landscape, but from the rumblings that I do hear up here, Tet McMillan has been the wide receiver 1 in this class for almost like a year and a half now. We've been talking about, and I thought it was really interesting how some noise creeps in and then everybody starts to pull back off of that. And obviously, there's going to be holes in his game, but I think people were trying to maybe said those holes were maybe a little wider than what we thought they were, or didn't give him enough credit to be able to fix those. So I'm stamping on the fact that I think he can get around that and fix those. I think he's gone to a really good team in the Carolina Panthers. Even if you don't love his talent, definitely not a perfect prospect, but you look at the opportunity coming his way. The only real competition for him is Adam Thielen. Jalen Coker was nice last year, but I don't think he's going to be enough to be like that wide receiver 2 that some of his truthers kind of thought he was going to be. Tet McMillan kind of kills that for me. And so, I mean, if you look at what he can do, the Panthers are going to shape all of those other guys around Tet. Like Tet doesn't have to come in here and find his place among the other wide receivers. I think the other wide receivers have to find their place around them. And Dave Canales can absolutely do that. Last year, we look at the Panthers offense with not very good wide receivers to speak of. They were 11th in targets per game to their wide receivers, 13th in air yards to their wide receivers, and none of their wide receivers profile as air yards wide receivers. And they were actually 7th in end zone targets to the wide receiver position, which is somewhere I think Tet McMillan can excel. So, yeah, Dave Canales with the Panthers is doing a lot of really good things. And I'm taking that stamp on Tet McMillan. I've drafted him happily at the 103 in rookie drafts, Frank, and I think that is coming into being a little bit more of a spicy take. He's going more so at kind of the 5-6 from what I've seen, but I like Tet McMillan for 2025. I think he's going to come in. My rookie rankings, I don't have the wide receivers in front of me, but I think he's in the top 24 at wide receiver 22 at first blush, Frank. So like I said, I'm planting that flag, brother.
Yeah, I love that. Like he lands in a perfect spot where he's the clear-cut one in the Dave Canales offense. Bryce Young, like we spoke about earlier in the show, Young made major strides in the second half last year. McMillan goes around, or maybe a little later than Roma Dunze. Dunze didn't really have a good rookie year and still has a crowded receiver room. Why would I not take a shot on McMillan, who has more path to heavy volume, and we haven't seen him on an NFL field. Like, well, Dunze, we were high on him as a prospect, but the fact is he wasn't that productive as a rookie. So why
Yeah.
not take the flashy new toy in a better situation, like more of a clear cut wide receiver 1 for him in that offense. So I love that. Love
Yeah,
that call.
drafting with confidence. Drafting with confidence. This is going to be interesting, the tight end talk, because there's a lot of tight ends in this group. 2 main ones at the top, Frank. Neither of us took one of those 2 main ones in Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren. So which tight end are you planting your flag in for 2025?
Yeah. So for the first off, just a quick thought on that. Like Loveland, you love the player, good receiver. It's a crowded room, and rookie tight ends may take a little longer, even though
Mhm.
recently we've seen, Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers ball out. But that's the reason for that. And Loveland will be more expensive. And then Tyler
Yeah.
Warren. I think if Daniel Jones starts, which I'm starting to think he will, just because I
Hmm.
feel like Shane Steichen will want to keep his job and make a short-sighted decision like that. That would help Tyler Warren. But again, he went higher in the draft, so he probably, yeah, he goes higher in fantasy so far. So I went with Mason Taylor just because
Nice.
there's a path to volume for Taylor with the Jets. You look at that, the pass catching group there for the Jets, and it's Garrett Wilson, and it's like Josh Reynolds and Alan Lazard. So
Oof.
Taylor has some opportunity there. It'll be a run heavy offense. Justin Fields is the quarterback, but you know, maybe Taylor can have like a Cole Kmet type of season where he's a red zone threat. Taylor could be a late pick in your best ball league in a jet stack where you have Fields and Wilson, who I like to take. So, yeah, people liked Taylor as a prospect. I think he's polished and ready to make an impact, and he comes at a good value.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that, and that avenue is so clear, right? And I was actually kind of off Mason Taylor throughout the process, but now I'm kind of trying to find these shots on him because despite my feelings on like the prospect and stuff, these tight ends can transcend that sometimes. Or the guy you think is going to be a massive failure because he didn't produce in college just comes out and he's a solid starting tight end for you. So the tight end group in this class is one where I'm kind of just trying to diversify as much as possible, right? Where trying to catch pieces of all of them in certain areas. In best ball, I mean, for me, it's just really dictated by the stack that I'm going to get if I'm attacking some of these guys. But in season long, like it's Mason Taylor is up there for short term production with some of these guys maybe looking better long term. I like that pick in Mason Taylor, despite maybe me not being as much on the prospect, but on the situation and volume that could be ahead for him. And in Justin Fields, I don't think is that bad. You mentioned the Cole Kmet season that he had. Justin Fields is going to be running around there. And if you think a big bodied tight end is going to be running across the field parallel to him as a safety net while he's getting chased down by defensive linemen, I think Mason Taylor can definitely be that. Red zone crossers and stuff like that, you wwere spot on with the avenue that he has to produce and remains to be seen.
But I want to add one thing that it could get to a point, like with the others that we talked about, where drafters see that there's a more of a path to opportunity for Taylor, and then he maybe goes even ahead of Loveland or Warren, and that's the point where we'd be like, no, 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 we go with
No, no, you don't do
the
that.
players that went in the first round. They're better prospects, even though they have a more crowded, competition. So we have to monitor, as always, price. But Taylor's in a good spot for targets right away.
Yeah, that top tier of rookie tight ends is very, very clear. So that's a good point, Frank, that Colson Loveland, Tyler Warren, no matter what, if they're available at a decent value, because the cost might be a little bit too high. And I think the next tier is the one that we're in right now is probably almost a full round behind these guys. And it's got guys like Mason Taylor that you mentioned. It's got Harold Fannin Jr. It's got Elijah Arroyo from Seattle. And it's got my tight end flag plant, one Terrence Ferguson for the Seattle Rams, the Los Angeles Rams. Um, I just think you have to pay attention when Sean McVay bucks up with the top 50 pick on a player. Um, we were talking on our other show about white skill position players being lunch pail princes, Frank. And we were talking about Jack Besh maybe being the lunch pail prince that was promised and gets drafted in Los Angeles to be kind of the white replacement for Cooper Kupp. It was not Jack Besh. And so now Terrence Ferguson is the lunch pail prince that was promised. And I think it's going to be like the short term might be a little bit bumpy for sure, because what we would really like is some inline and some slot snaps. I think the slot snaps are going to be hard to come by maybe in year one with Devontae Adams and Puka Nakua both being really effective out of the slot and outside. So curious to see how many of those sets they run where he's able to be in the slot with those two wide receivers outside. But I think he is a guy that will play in line and can be a good tight end for you. I think he allows them to do things that they've probably never been able to do with Tyler Higbee and his limitations. So I think Terrence Ferguson, especially long term, could be a cheat code getting in like the mid third of your rookie drafts. And I don't even know where he's at on underdog, but it's probably just dirt cheap. So he's a guy I'm planting my flag in, because if Sean McVay feels that confident in him and he's going to get attached to that passing game and he only has to beat out Tyler Higbee, who is really a nothing at this stage in his career, I'm planting my flag in that. And I think Terrence Ferguson is going to turn out to be one of the best draft values we had in this class.
Yeah, that's a good point. And another note on that is that the Rams reportedly were willing to take him in their first round with their first round pick, and that's why they traded down because they're like, way above consensus on Ferguson clearly. So the wise move is to trade down, and they got their guy. And like you said, Sean McVay is a brilliant mind. When he's on someone, you got to pay attention. So I like that call as well.
Yeah, man. We want to attach to those offenses of Sean McVay, and it looks like they've retooled that room really nicely around Stafford to try and make another run. So good on him. And I think those wide receivers clearing out space is only good for Terrence Ferguson to be able to get some of those dink and dunk targets and maybe like compile his way to a decent fantasy season in year one, and then maybe wheels up after that. But I think we're going to get some usable weeks out of him as early as year one.
Yeah, and like back to best ball, having that Ram stack would be nice. Even if you don't take Stafford, like if you go Nakua or Adams and then take Ferguson just to have a piece of that offense, because it's weird. Like
Yeah,
sometimes they're scoring points, but Stafford doesn't give you what you want in fantasy
exactly.
because they run so much in the red zone. The Rams do, so that could be an option to do. Maybe you take like a running quarterback that you don't really need to stack, and then put him with a couple Rams.
Yeah,
That would
like a
be,
Justin Fields. And
yeah,
then you could even stack him dirt cheap at the end after you've done that. So I
yeah,
like that call. And Frank, this is getting me juiced to get into best ball season. So
yeah.
I'm gonna have to load up the old account and we're gonna have to get to drafting soon, buddy. So this is good, man. That's what we got for the show sheet. This was a fun relaunch episode. We got some of our, we made our stamps on a couple of players here, Frank, and we kind of told some people about some guys that you might want to be off of after the draft and some guys that you might want to dive into. And I think that was a pretty good summary. So, Frank, I do want to give you this opportunity because you and I do have all sorts of other places where we put out content and things. Of course, this podcast, The Meat and Potatoes, is through True North Fantasy Football. So please subscribe there and check out that Substack, but it's also kind of an outlet for us to get our workout, right? Like we're a team of two. We want ourselves to get some exposure and things like that too, Frank. So why don't you let the people know, other than True North, where they can find some of your content, and just I want to get the community wrapped around us and supporting the work that we do. So let them know.
Yeah, so if you're into fantasy football, my fantasy football content will be at Rotoballer and Fantasy Pros. And if you're that's where you're probably listening for. But I also have some baseball content everywhere, like and whether it's betting or fantasy at sites called Best Odds or fantasy six pack. Just lots of sites working for, but excited for fantasy football. I like that I'm into it early and taking a little pause from the thick of baseball season. It was a great episode, great talking through, some of the values and thinking about how the market could shift on some of these rookies, like we mentioned, RJ Harvey's theme. So it'll be interesting to discuss that with you on this show. And
Totally.
doing things like that is going to help us be more successful, not only for the listeners, but ourselves, like with our own
Yeah.
team. So it's always nice to have discussions like this throughout the off season. And I'm stoked to continue to be able to do so with you.
Yeah, dude, I kind of thought that from the jump is that you and I are kind of going to be iron sharpening iron throughout this show. And I'm very excited to track some of that stuff forward. I'm excited for us to get little bits that are funny. I'm excited for us to have, guys that we are attached to where it's a shitbag player. And I'm saying, hey, Frank, look what your boy did this week or something like that kind of stuff is so much fun. So I hope the listeners have gotten some value out of this show. Super excited to move forward with you, Frank, and super excited to move forward with all of our subscribers and all our loyal followers. So check that episode description out for all of our social media details. Check out the YouTube channel if you're listening to this on audio. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought. Show us that we've got some people coming around the show, and we're just going to be that more excited to keep bringing you content. So for the Italian Stallion, one Frank Amarante, I am Trav, and we will see you next week. Peace.